Really important. I don't know if there is any tires. Yeah.
Some good sources there.
I think release them. Sorry to use that time, Neil.
Okay, so it looks like we've got to the position where it's actually going to go live. And
Good timing, guys. We're waiting for you. Like this.
Guys, here we can start.
so we can crank up. So welcome everyone, and apologies for the delay. Welcome councillors, staff, and those who might be watching this morning. Are there any apologies? I don't think there are. Any declarations of interest? If not, we'll move on to item 3, the confirmation of the previous minutes have been circulated. Any errors or omissions?
You move that, Mr. Chair, as it is.
Thank you. Move Councillor Holding, second. Councillor Williams. Any further discussion? If not, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, no. It's carried. Thank you. Moving now to item 4.1. Tech Museum and Archives. So, Mr. George.
Thank you. With Mrs. Julius and Mr. Anna here to answer any questions on this topic. The long and the short of it is that the opportunity came to increase the new business standard in NBS. Building standard, yeah, that's quite right. New building standard from 66 to 100% for the Waitaki Museum and Archive building during works, and so we had some communication with members during that time. We just wish to formally note that that opportunity was taken, and potentially in the future we may want to do some policy work around what NBS strength we do have with our buildings at moving forward. But I think this is a good opportunity just to test where we would like to be with some of our public buildings. Mr. Julius, Mr. Armour, would like to add anything?
That's good. Well,
Any questions?
Okay, so are there any questions, Councillor?
Yeah, just a question, thanks, Neil or Toby, but just what page are we on? Page 13 of the paper. Under background, the middle paragraph, the second paragraph, it states through the addition of a plywood diaphragm to the first floor ceiling. We had a discussion, and it states as part of stage 2 project scope, the existing ceilings to the first floor will be replaced with a new insulated gyp ceiling.
Yeah.
So to me, that's talking about the same ceiling, or is it not?
yes, it is. It is. So the existing ceiling's being removed to put a gyp ceiling in.
Yeah.
So part of that is to get new services and that up into the ceiling space.
Yep.
So we're already removing the existing ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Ideal opportunity to apply the ceiling first with a structural diaphragm,
Yeah.
and then install a gyp ceiling over the top of it.
Over the top of the pipe. Okay. Understand that, Toby. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Any comments? Well, if there are no further questions, is someone prepared to move the recommendation?
Yeah, I'm happy to move it, Chairman King. Just to say, I read the papers, I just have been cross-eyed trying to read all the reports. From a layman's point of view, it was late last night, I was trying to do the reading, but it makes perfect sense to do the work at the right at the time.
Yep.
And replace the heating and ventilation out of depreciation reserves is perfect sense as well. So I'm fully supportive of the recommendation. So pleased to move it.
Someone care to second? Any further discussion?
Just, Mr. Chair, just to reiterate that, absolutely makes sense. Improving sure our assets line as well. It makes us a amount. Building and our treasures.
Thank you. So I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. No. Carried. Thank you. Moving on to breakwater maintenance.
The summary of this report is where Mr. Rose has been busy managing rock maintenance work at the breakwater. During the process that work, it has been found that there's been some additional damage on the end of the breakwater, and quite a large cavity. Roads, it's recommending that work be done relatively using some of the photos and then before quite cracked, which shows it's not really being supported underneath. And I guess the big storm came through was quite vulnerable. He's also recommending that we complete the final stage of rock armouring to link the two bits we've done together to make a seamless armouring through the breakwater. I'm hoping to have a video to be able to show you shortly that gives a bit more explanation around that work. From a funding perspective, we have been funding $230,000 a year in the post-fund, $230,000 a year in the LTP. I know that budget's not approved just yet, but discussions so far haven't removed that budget, and it's proposed that we fund $400,000 at a allocation, so that will be a relatively short-term loan until that's paid back by that operational money. Of course, there is some risk that we may need to do some more work during those years it takes to pay that money back, but we're thinking at this stage we will be able to get through relatively comfortable. And if we did need to do some extra work, then just see that out slightly more funding to using that to be a bit longer. So it seems to stack up all right. Money, so the consideration of that. So this video works.
Okay, so we,
But in the meantime, go through any questions.
are there any questions for Councillor?
Yeah, Neil, what, or if any contributions to regional council do to this, because it seems over the years when we want to try and do something down here, the regional council pokes their nose into it, prevents us doing something, and commands we do other things. Why don't they contribute to this as they claim ownership of their hard?
Yeah, so the ownership of the breakwater itself is council. It is quite a huge council's structure. So the Otago Regional Council does have jurisdiction over the actual water itself. So I guess at the end of the day, no matter who was doing the work, our ratepayers were still paying for it. So even if it was the ORC looking after breakwater, they would create a rating area of those who own the breakwater, and they would have to be rated for it anyway. Probably not a large rate has still be paying for it regardless.
Have we ever asked them for contribution?
On various occasions, yes. But it's our structure.
I could just add to that, we have asked in the past, and there are always the same. Usually it's no relate to that. If they do say they'll do it, they would create a rating area, which would be even more concentrated on our rate. It certainly wouldn't look at a regional rate, so the cost for very quite possibly strongly on our rate. This allows us to get on to it. Confidence our guys will do cost-effective job.
Thank you.
My question was more, this committee passes this today, the 100% protection that hasn't been achieved for 70 years. Is there the way the choice of the short-term loan fund, is that putting it more on this ratepayer now, or is there a mechanism where the future people that are going to enjoy the benefit pay as well? Or
Yeah, good question. So doing an analysis of what's been spent on the breakwater over the last 50 years, the $230,000 a year is down. So during the last expenditure was quite a big line formed at that stage. There's payback. So that the 230K seems to be about average expenditure on the breakwater over its lifetime, which then makes it as few as possible. Council could, if it was concerned about that moving forward and thought the breakwater might cost at least to maintain than it had previously, they could reduce that 230 during the long-term plan process, say to 180 or something if it wished to, which has changed the risk profile a little bit. So there are options that council could change their funding if it wished. Extend out further. If you want to, that would be considered as part of the LPP.
So that
wouldn't affect this decision as such.
a discussion for a later point, but I think I'd like to point out that we're always going to be paying some money to keep this in place. There's no getting around it now. Is it ready to go? No.
Yep. This is one of the breakwater head. There's another video south of the Ramses as well that we can see if you're interested. Otherwise, we can play this one just to give you a bit of an idea. Yep, happy to go. This is the east face there. That would be proposed to pull the rocks off that face to expose it and do a proper dive survey to see what cavities we've got behind those rocks. You'll see a couple of cavities start to come in there on the corner, but the major ones are on the north side, just around here a wee bit further. So that's a major one you can see on the right there. That's about 2 meters high, but 2 meters wide and goes in about 4 meters deep. And there's another one in the middle of the structure as well. The narrower gap there, which it's pretty difficult even getting the divers in with these conditions with the swell. You can see how fractured the top of the structure is as well, right through. So that cavity to the north, they're expecting it goes right through and joins up to this other cavity you'll see in a minute on the west side. Over here, it's hard to see. There's another cavity here that's about 2 meters high by 600 wide, and that goes in at least 3 or 4 meters. And they think that might join up right under the seal there, right through. And what we're concerned about, it would actually go right through to the east face as well. That's why we want to pull the rocks away, get the divers down there, because no point pumping concrete into those cavities if it's going to drain out on the other side. So we've got to make sure that's completely, boxed up for the pour. It's probably expected a minimum of 50 cubes would be pumped into it, but who knows on the day, it could be 70 or 80, 100 cubes, depending on what's really in there. So that was one part of the work there. So it's proposed to put a decent rock armouring out from the head, and that'll provide protection while the divers and builders actually do the work to concrete the structure, and then it'll obviously provide long-term protection with a lot of big, 10 to 20 ton rock. So a lot of good sized rock to really sure it holds in place. So that's one part of the project, and that equates to about $250,000 of the cost. The remaining money, the other $150,000 that's proposed, is south of the Ramses. There's a 60-metre section unprotected, and some other drone video footage that we could actually play of that if you want to see, shows some major undermining and also some really big cavities, especially under the 2001 breach that cost council a lot of money in 2002 and was quite controversial back then. So it would be really great to be able to protect that vulnerable section. Otherwise, that is at risk of breaching again, I believe, because it is quite significant, the breaches under that. Yeah.
Good, well, thanks for that. I mean, that gives you a bit of an idea.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I was just giving a wee bit of feedback to the governance advisor, which said some are requesting could they see the images on the live stream because they didn't have video on. So they're also saying that it is very difficult to hear the background noise and so on, to make sure everyone sees stuff. Thank you.
So we can put those videos on our website or
Yep.
ultimately there is access.
Yep. So we've got 3 drone videos. We've got one of the entire structure, and then there's the one you've seen, and then another one really honing in on that 60-metre protection that's not currently rock armoured, to give you an idea of the undermining and the breaches, or the cavities.
I think that one gave us a bit of an idea of what's required. And it would be really good if some of those other things went on the website. And who's interested can check it out for themselves. So we'll open the discussion there.
Right, so one more comment. Just the second part of the recommendation is seeking a variation to the existing contract we have with Road Metals to do the placement of the rock component of the work. So we have been through quite a proper tender process for the work we're doing at the moment, and we're just seeking a variation to Road Metals for that rock placement component, just to make sure we've covered it off and that you're comfortable with that.
Okay, so it's open for questions.
I think that was such a great production. It explained things. I'm happy to move.
Yeah. So if there's no questions, certainly move the creature. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Timerdale, any further discussion?
Just to reiterate, that videos on our website, but it is very easy to see. Actually, you don't actually understand the scale of it until it was great to see. That hole was 2 meters high, quite pretty big holes, and we need some good work done there. I think we are getting the provision of those very large rocks, the hard rock that's been going in. Great. We really are getting on top of the issue around the damage to the breakwater, and by dealing with the sections as we have over the last few years, we're making good progress. So getting on and doing this is good. It's necessary work, and if another $400,000 sounds like a lot of money, but taken over a number of years, funding through giving a good amount of protection for a good role. So see it happen.
Thank you. We won't have an unless we look after the break. Any further discussion? Councillor.
Yeah, I was going to comment that with the rock armouring that's been done to date, the number of times that you hear, South Hill, you can actually feel a thump of the swell hitting the breakwater. And as the rock armouring is going along, the number of times you can actually hear that physical impact of the waves hitting is diminishing. So when the last bit is done back down towards the penguin colony, I expect the rock armouring, the rock armouring will actually just dissipate the force of the waves coming in, reduce the load on the breakwater, and extend its life by a large amount. So it's money well spent to maintain the breakwater for the future.
Thank you. So with that, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
No. That's carried. Thank you. On now to item 3, send mattresses rock.
Yeah, so this issue here has been one we've been grappling with for quite a while. The background is around where the sand mattress project wasn't particularly successful, and we managed to install rock protection instead of sand mattress for the bulk of the work. However, there was a bit of sand mattress that was delayed. We have been through another resource consent process to rehabilitate the existing sand mattress site, which is now in front of you, 33 metres long across the beach. We had a look at a few options, and we've had, as part of the resource consent process, and the option that we're recommending to you is to leave the sand mattress in place and place rock over the lower part of it. and that's an estimated cost of around $85,000. There is an alternative option which is to remove sand mattresses completely and then basically do site like the rest of the rock which we've done. However, there is a significantly greater cost, probably a little bit over double. And from the advice we've received, we believe that the prudent action is to carry on with the $85,000 option at this time. If worst case scenario, which we don't think will happen, but if it did, at a later date, the rocks could be moved and the sand material removed. However, we do believe it will work like a geotextile material, and that this option is most proven. We don't have a budget for this project, and so we would need to create a new loan, $85,000, and back through the process and re-add somewhere around $7,000 a year to rates.
One thing in the report, so we've got 85,000 one-off costs. What's the periodic maintenance estimate?
I could probably answer that. Happy with that? Okay. So just recently, with just putting in the long-term plan, a $30,000 annual sum for coastal protection and maintenance. So that would include from the freezer building to the Oamaru Creek, right down to the Holmes Wharf Mole, and also include the inner harbour. So for monitoring the last few years of that rock revetment along there, there hasn't been significant damage, just small isolated pockets that you'd probably want to keep on top of. So on this small section that's only 33 metres, we'd be presuming annually it would be pretty minimal maintenance on that section, because it is a very, not a high slope to it. So the run up, that it doesn't cause as much damage as other areas.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to make the point that there's been a fair bit of public criticism of the rock mattresses in the past. But just as pointed out in the background here, that the rock mattresses were supposed to cover 240 metres of coastline. Was only 33 metres was installed before a huge storm. And that huge storm just eroded the beach and damaged the rock mattresses, sorry, sand mattresses that were there. So they weren't in themselves, just a stupid idea at all. Just the fact that nature conspired to defeat council's attempt to put the sandfield mattresses on the beach. So this really is now just trying to make the best out of a bad situation, and the recommendation makes perfect sense.
I'm just wondering that as part of the project that is being looked at, to be sure that there's no environmental effects from the sand mattresses continuing to deteriorate. I don't know what they're made out of.
Yep. So they're a geotextile material. As part of the resource consent process, we had to get affected party approval from the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colony, from DOC, from iwi. So they've all given their affected party approval. So it didn't have to be a notified resource consent application. From talking to Dr. Philippa Agnew in relation to the penguin colony, there's been no signs of any fibre in the nests or any other nuisance or disturbance caused to the birds because of the fibres. Even right down the coastline, the railways are putting in a geofabric cloth under those rocks. It's not as thick as this material, but basically they got them behind the resource consent and didn't show any concerns for that. Yeah.
I actually had a look down there myself this morning. It's not a big area, and I mean it's easy with hindsight to say we should have perhaps done something else. Now we're sorting out that hindsight, if you like. So if there's no further questions,
Just a quick question. Just ORC on the resource consent had a request for more information from the engineering. Are they happy to sign that off with the new information I got to receive?
Basically, the council engaged engineer did provide feedback to all those questions that were asked with the RFIs, and they processed those, and they did give approval for it to proceed. Yep.
Essentially, they wouldn't have, ORC wouldn't have approved the consent, so we're happy with that. information quite a bit.
Okay, so. Councillor Wilson,
Yeah, I'm happy to move the resolution as recommendation there. Chairman.
thank you. Councillor Wilson, is there a second? Any further discussion? I'll put the recommendation. All those opposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.1, sale of development land.
So relatively straightforward, is we've done on a number of occasions. We've got a party who wishes to purchase the land under the building owner. Yep, relatively straightforward and simple. Would there be any additional information or?
No, we've had the request, and the particulars will be discussed in the public excluded report.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, should have mentioned that this report's in two parts. This parts and public is just to so you front aware of what council is considering, and then the financial detail is public excluded. Commercial reasons.
Okay, so information's all in front of you. Councillor Holman.
I'm just happy to move that we don't receive the information.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Tadman. Any further discussion?
I just want to elaborate a little further on the reason for two parts for this report, because there will be people in the public who think they should know what the terms are going to be. The reality is we are in a negotiating situation on land, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to make public what those terms might be before we actually get into negotiation. So I just want to give assurance that we are working to solve the ratepayers and get price as possible for the land, and sort of make the deal happen. So as part of it, doing part of it, part of it, so that people know itself, but the sensitive details of terms before they negotiate.
So with that, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. And that's carried. Moving on to page 53, the activity report. We'll go through this page by page. So I'm up to page 56, and if anyone's got a question, answer.
Yeah, just on that page, yeah, Mr. Chairman, that photo of the tunnel of the land to the side, just where is that?
That's Racky's Tunnel.
It is Racky's Tunnel. Okay, thanks, Sarah. I thought it might have been, but didn't tell us. Yeah.
Looks slightly different at the moment.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, in the picture.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to Three Waters, page 57.
Just to expand a little on the Three Waters reforms, I think I heard Neil say it was about 800 staff hours, probably more than that was put into this. So I think just trying to quantify to ask how much work was involved. And I've got quite a few deadlines coming up, so the workload around this is absolutely massive, and I think councillors, we're going to have quite a role in that as well in the upcoming month or two. You know, we've got big changes potentially in front of us, so just recognising that things are moving very fast.
Yeah, probably on that note, I would just like to note thanks to Mr. Michael Goldingham, who led the RFI together. So yeah, it was a lot of work, and we know for Christmas break as well, to try and get everything done by 31st of Jan. So yeah, there's a lot of hours, and appreciation for everyone on that team. I think probably the second part of that for everyone to note is that we are hopeful that we'll know the results from the RFI by the end of February. So PIA has that from everybody now, and has been working working closely with Scottish Water to interpret all of that information so that it can provide a view back to councils and communities about what it all means moving forward.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just thanks for the report. Just on this page, on the draft backflow prevention policy, backflow is the undesirable reversal of the flow of water or other substances into the drinking water supply system. Can someone just explain in layman's terms how it happens?
Through the chair, yep. So what happens is somebody might have a hose in their, a bucket of water, and we get a low pressure event in our network and it sucks it back into the network. This is to try and, or not to try, to develop a policy going forward. Part of it will also be identifying who's responsible for it and who pays for it.
Yeah, thank you, Marty.
Page 59.
Yeah, there's a number of details there of some projects that we've done for tranche one, but overall, now we're looking for the got to have it done by March next year.
2020.
So we've got, yeah, we've got 13 months. Are we well on track?
Yeah, so the last update I had was yes, we're on track and confident of achieving that target at this stage. Mr. Casey, did you want to?
Yeah, through the chair. Certainly, I just had a meeting about it this morning. These projects have been prioritised above our locally funded projects. So then we are in a good space with undertaking this work by March next year.
Yeah, just on bottom page 59, Marty, the compliance annual drinking water survey results. Just in the basis of the events to the south of Waitaki, report that this talks about other protozoa and bacterial contamination. Heavy metals, does Waitaki test for heavy metals and our results?
Through the chair, periodically we do test for heavy metals. In 2019, I think we did test in the Wahimo area, so in Stoneburn, and prior to that, before we connected up Goodwood and Dumback, the Ministry of Health required us to test for heavy metals. So they're just done periodically. They're not something that is a mandatory test. Under the new drinking water standards, they'll be required to be done every 3 years. But once again, it is just a snapshot in time. We don't have any concerns in this regard. We have done testing as a result of what happened in Dunedin. We did it earlier last week, and we'll get those results back this week and we'll report back to you then.
Okay, thank you.
Page 60. Now move on to roading, page 61.
Councillors.
Any questions on page 61?
I may again. Dancy's passed, Mike. There was obviously some of the photos you showed. Dancy did a good job in there, so it's all good.
Yes, it is through the chair. That was really heavily hit up there. It's with the water running longitudinally down the roads, there's a lot of scouring. We lost the approaches to a number of the washover creeks, washover structures. So the team responding there to get it open as quickly as it did was an amazing piece of work, and good with the community connection there too. But it was getting the helicopter fly through to give a scoping of what was there and showed the value on that. It was $1,500 for the helicopter. We have that with Central Otago, but it gave us a good picture of the scope of what we had to do. So preparation to go through there was a much better position that the right gear went in to start with. So it worked well.
Yeah, well done to the team.
Yeah, and well done. I mean, it was during the holiday period of August, which made it a little bit harder. Anyway, the rain was very welcomed by a good part of our community.
About half the community.
Not those in tents. Page 62, 63. Councillor Holder.
I just wonder if you could elaborate on the delegation of the street lighting, street sweeping, and stationary vehicle.
Yeah, well, that's through the chair. That's with the transport or Waka Katawi with the state highway. That's those delegations. It's a formal agreement that gives us the authorisation to carry out the enforcement work or management of it. Some of those have been sitting around, haven't quite been signed up for some years or maybe decades. So we're just tidying those up, and it's an interesting process to go through, making sure that we are aligned with with what their expectations are for doing that. So it's nothing different to what we have done in the past and what we do for our roads, but it's saying that's what we do across the state highway network.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
You might just go into your road safety coordination paragraph. You talk about the communities at risk register 2020, and it shows those, this identifies communities that are overrepresented nationally in terms of road safety, in other words, poor road safety. Where does Waitaki District Council or Waitaki area sit on that national register?
Through the chair, the Waitaki, as far as intersection, scores extremely poorly. That references or reflects very closely with our accident rate or our crash rate, not accidents. We need to do something more with our intersections, significantly urban ones, but the rural ones are also just skimming away, just slightly outside the that high risk profile. When we put them together, we're sitting just there or thereabouts, as going from medium to high risk. So there's a lot of work to do, which is why we're getting support for our intersection works. And that's why we are focused on doing a number of intersections around learned behaviour. It's around bringing the community on board and playing to the future too. Interestingly enough, there in their communities at risk register also talks about cycling and pedestrians. And Waitaki, while not scoring in the super highest range for risk on that, it is enough to say that we're actually within that window if we need to be conscious of it. So it's all modes. I know that you've said in the past about being very mode neutral in what we're designing. And this is what's giving us that information. And it did say 2020, so that is the most recent communities at risk register.
Right. Thanks, Mike.
Any further questions on road?
Oh, no, don't worry. It's not roading. Carry on.
Well, we'll move into recreation.
Yeah, just Alps to Ocean. Obviously, there's been a lot of damage to the track with the rain. How are we looking at for how we go about fixing?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the track's all open again at the moment. We did some initial repair work just to basically get passage back through it. But the track's certainly not back in the state or the standard it was before the floods. We're currently working through a process to put together a program of work, and we aim to apply to MB for some funding to cover that work.
Do we keep a record or keep in touch with, say, a hospital or anything like that if there is injuries on any sections of track so that we can actually prioritise some areas over others?
Yeah, well, we run a health and safety register, for instance, on the trail. We get reports either through the police or through partners, accommodation providers along the trail. So where we receive reports, we do investigate that and have a look. I guess the section of trail that probably has the most incidents at the moment is the Quailbin Road.
Yeah, just those photos on page 65 here. The one on the right, the large washout, the very lengthy washout. Is that on the Hall Road or where's that?
Oh, that's on the Hall Road, yes, correct.
Right. How do you retrieve that?
That is the question which we'll be looking at. So.
Bulldozer.
Yeah, a lot of material to replace and also to actually protect it in the future against future floods.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, through these processes which we go through, we also look at what we can do to, I guess, improve the resilience as part of it, and potentially we get funding from MB to do that. One of the options we need to look at in these sections is we do have the flood routes back out to the state highway. In the long term, may need to look at whether those actually need to become the permanent routes and whether we need to look at additional clip-on structures or bridges to the state highway bridges. So, you know, it's the process we're working through at the moment.
Any further questions on page 5? 6.
It doesn't say much in here, but obviously we've talked about the playground at the public gardens a bit, and potential needing more funding. Just wanting to know where that's sort of at and know what we can expect to see.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, Jane Matchett is working on an application for the Taiga Community Trust. I believe that they're currently reviewing current applications this month. So I don't think we'll actually get our application, well, we won't get it in time for this review. That closed basically prior to Christmas. So it'll be basically the next funding round, which I think will be 2 months later. So March, April.
Thank you. Page 67. Yeah. And we move on to property. Page 69. Page 69. Must be really good information. There's no question.
Well done, team.
Okay, we've got to the end of the property. So if there's not any questions, would someone care to move that you received? Move Chair, seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. No. Moving on to 5.3. This is. And I'd like to move accordingly. Is there a second? And just speaking to it, Neil's leaving at the end of the week. I know when I first came on council and last few assets, I didn't really know what it entailed, but Neil's been really helpful to me through the whole period. And we meet regularly, and he keeps me informed, and I keep him informed every now and then of the odd detail. And in fact, some of our discussions we get to quite personal levels. So it's been really good, Neil, that relationship. So all the very best, and we will miss you. Any further?
Mr. Chair, said some words during the Harbour Area Committee. Live stream at that time, I believe. Yeah, just to echo those thoughts. I was a very young councillor when Neil first turned up here. And you know, thinking back over the years, you know, all of the things, all the projects that we've done, that we've achieved, councillors and Neil and his team, you know, they are considerable. And this is a very different council now to what it was back in those days, and sounds like it's, you know, about a century or something, wasn't quite that. But you know, Neil's had a major impact in the time that he's been here, and you know, whether it's at work, whether it's socially and so forth. And we will miss him. Thank you very much, Neil. And as King has said, bless you to Susie family. We will big move. Wish you well.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind words. It's been a privilege to work for the Waitaki community over the last 12.5 years and be involved in some really interesting projects. And the community certainly has grown a lot from when we arrived back in 2008, I think it was. It's a very different community now. It's vibrant. It's moving forward. That's been really great to be part of. This community has got a great council. Been really awesome working with you all. And every one of you has got the community at heart and wants to do very best for the community, which is fantastic. So thank you too for your help. For me, I have learned an awful lot, and I believe I'm going away a better person than I was when I arrived. So thank you.
Good, thank you. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Okay, thank you very much. So that concludes our assets meeting.
Move into public excluded.
And public excluded, but
We'll do that later.
we're going to do that later. So we just adjourn the meeting now. Thank you for your involvement, and for those watching, I hope it's been of interest. And so with that, I'll declare the meeting closed.
Adjourn.
Everyone, we've been rather efficient getting through our Assets Committee agenda. Our Community Culture and Regulatory Committee meeting isn't scheduled to start until 1. So what we're going to do is take a break from now. We're going to end this live stream, and then we'll be starting a new live stream at 1 o'clock with that other committee. So in the meantime, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll sign off for now. Thank you.